Hello everyone, and welcome to Pathfinder Drum Corps lesson number 4 on reading drum corps sheet music part 1. This lesson is going to begin as if you know nothing about reading sheet music of any kind, much less drum corps sheet music, and will expand on what we learned in lesson number 3. Now, if you have no prior experience to reading sheet music, this is probably a lesson you're going to come back to many times. So, let's go ahead and get started. The drum clef is indicated by the dual vertical bars on the far left. This is what tells us that this is drum music. Though as mentioned in our last lesson, you may find some sheet music that uses no clef symbol or a treble clef. Each grouping of 5 horizontal lines is called a staff. We frequently use a separate staff for each of the drum corps instruments. Shown here is a 4-staff setting. Also on the far left, you see 2 4s located one on top of the other. This is a time signature. In this case, the music is 4/4 time. The top number is how many beats or counts per measure. So here we have 4 beats. You may see 3/4 time, where there are only 3 beats per measure. In 4/4 time, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. In 3/4 time, you count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, etc. The bottom number indicates the note value for one beat. The most common number here is 4, which means that each beat is a quarter note. But if you go to 6/8 time, each beat is an eighth note, but you still count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3/4 and 6/8 time are not the same. In drum corps, the majority of music will be 4/4 time. Just to clarify, in music, the definition of the term beat is the basic unit of time. It's how we count when we play. Contrary to some popular beliefs, beat has nothing to do with the intensity or the rhythm of the music. If a piece of music has any time signature, it has beat. This includes everything in the church hymnal, no matter what the choir director may tell you. Sometimes the sheet music will have a quarter note and an equal sign and then a number. That is the tempo or the speed of the music. The number is how many beats happen in a minute. You may also see a number followed by the letters BPM, which stands for beats per minute. I write all of my Pathfinder drum corps music at 120 beats per minute, since that is the same speed at marching, 120 steps per minute. That way you count every time you take a step, which helps keep the drums and the feet in step together. Unless otherwise stated, anything in these videos will be 4/4 time at 120 beats per minute. Each of these sections separated by a single vertical line is called a measure. Every time we start counting over at 1, it is a new measure, symbolized by a vertical line from the top to the bottom of the staff. Here we see 4 measures and each measure is numbered. This makes it easier when practicing if you're just going to focus on a certain section and you can say, start at measure 13. You can number every staff like this or just do the top staff like I usually do. Although there is no universal standard for drum corps sheet music, one thing that is almost universally accepted is that drum corps sheet music does not use whole or half notes. Quarter notes are typically the largest note you will see. So if you don't know what a whole or a half note is, that's fine because we normally don't use them. But if you are curious, a whole note is a note that is hollow, in other words, not filled in with solid black, and has no stem, and the half note is hollow, but has the stem. However, we do use whole rests if you play nothing during an entire measure. One reason for not using whole or half notes is because all drum sounds are instant, unlike a piano which may hold a note for a measure, and thus require a half note. So, on to quarter notes and actually playing. A measure of 4 snare drum quarter notes would look like this. This is counted as 1, 2, 3, 4. As I alluded to earlier, playing on the numbers themselves is called the beat. The first beat in a measure is called the downbeat, and the last beat in a measure is called the upbeat. So in 4/4 time, the 1 is the downbeat and the 4 is the upbeat. The line going up or down from the note is called the stem, and is always on the right side of the note. If a sound is to be made on the downbeat and nothing else, it would have a quarter note and then quarter rests, like this. This is rather common to see for a simple part. A rest is an indication of where you do not play. So, if you are brand new to reading any form of music, this is what these two would sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we expand from 1 measure to 4 measures, an example would be like this. The measure number is above the staff. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now you know about the drum clef, time signatures, beat, how to find the tempo of the music, measures, quarter notes, and quarter rests. Now, time for a pop quiz. I'm going to show a different 4 measures of quarter notes and quarter rests, and you try to see if you know how to play it. You can pause the video and try it and then resume to see if you got it right. So, here we go. Pause now or play along with me. Hopefully you got that. Time to move to the eighth notes. A measure of only eighth notes would look like this. This is counted as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So it would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Eighth note rest looks like this. We do not use a note less than a quarter note on the beat if the next note isn't until the next beat or later. We would just use a quarter note. So you would never see an eighth note on the beat followed by an eighth note rest. But you would use the eighth note rest if there was no note on the beat, but there was a note played on the and between beats. It would look like this. This is called playing off beat, and you would play and count it like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 2 consecutive eighth notes that start on a beat will have a single horizontal bar connecting their stems. This bar is called a beam. An eighth note without a beam, such as an eighth rest or the following eighth note, will have a flag so that it can be identified. An eighth note will always have a single flag or a single beam. One quick way to look for a beat is to look for the break between the beams. Do you notice that break between the 3 beat and the 4 beat? Those are 4 consecutive eighth notes, but there is a break at the start of the 4 beat. So now for the second quiz, reading and playing, quarter notes and eighth notes. I'll show a measure and you try to read it and play it correctly. Pause the video if you want to study it for longer before I play it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 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 Now let's try 2 measures. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Since there are eighth notes, you can count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, as I did to make it easy, or once you get acclimated, you can just count the beats 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's try one more, counting just the beats instead of all the eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All of these note values work for all drum corps instruments. A quarter note on the snare looks the same as a quarter note on the bass, except for the location on the staff itself. Now it's time to try 16th notes. This is where things can get more intricate. A 16th note will have 2 beams coming off of it, or 2 flags if there is just one note. A 16th rest will have 2 flags. The flag on a rest is a small dot to the left of the slightly slanted stem and are smaller than the note head. Flags and beams of a note typically go to the right of the note stem. I prefer to have all the stems going upward in drum corps sheet music, just to make it easier. 16th notes are counted as 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. So playing a measure of just 16th notes would go like this. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Again, a 16th rest has 2 flags and looks like this. Okay, that wasn't so hard, but what about mixing 16th notes with quarter notes and eighth notes? Let's start with an easy one of 16th and quarter notes. Here we have 4 16th notes, and then a quarter note, and then it repeats. One thing to remember is that even though there's no beam between the last of the 4 16th notes grouped together and the quarter note, the gap between that 4th note and the quarter note is the same as all the preceding 16th notes. The reason there is no beam is because the quarter note starts the next beat, and sheet music never connects beam from one beat to the next. This rule also makes for some rather odd-looking sheet music at times, which we will get into later. So essentially what we have here is 5 consecutive notes of equal timing. We would count this measure of music like this. Note that even though we have 16th notes with a quarter note, the counting shows 5 consecutive notes. And just to confirm, it would sound like this.
1 E into 2 E into 3 E into 4 E into.
Now we change the quarter note to a pair of 8th notes. It changes the sheet music, of course, but really the difference is just adding a note after the quarter note. It sounds like this.
1 E into 2 E into 3 E into 4 E into.
Now, if we remove just one note, it tends to mess things up for beginners. I removed the note on the 2 beat. It should be easier since there is less to play, right? Go ahead and try. No, seriously, all beginners should pause the video and try to play this one at normal speed. Beginners will still try to play the 2 count instead of playing this.
1 E into 2 E into 3 E into 4 E into.
Remember that a note is the indication of time until the next note happens. But it may take a little addition to get the right spacing when there is a rest on the beat. Both of these measures have 4 notes that are a full beat apart. The only difference is that one plays on the beat and the other plays off the beat. If you don't know when the measure starts and stops and just listen to someone playing each measure, you'd think they're playing the same thing. But when you add the counting, you realize the difference.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and.
Okay, now let's go through some common difficulties when starting to read sheet music, especially when the notes have the same spacing between them no matter the note duration. Take a look at this and play it what you think it should be. Pause the video if you'd like. I won't play this until the end of this section. Remember that each beat starts with no beam on the left, so right away you can identify the 4 beats in this measure. Now, that only identifies the beat, which is a great foundation, but what about the rest of the notes? Let's start at the beginning with the note that I changed to a triangle just to make it easier to know which one I'm talking about. The first beat, the triangle one, has 2 beams coming off of it, so you know that the first note is a 16th note, which means that the next note will have to start on the E count. That note, the one now with a triangle, also has 2 beams touching it, so it also is a 16th note. But it only has 1 beam going to the right, so wouldn't that make it an 8th note? No, it doesn't. Notes that touch both the 16th and the 8th will have both 1 beam and 2 beam sides. What matters is if the second beam touches the note stem at all. Here it does, so this is a 16th note, meaning that the next note has to start on the next 16th count. The last note connected here has only 1 beam, thus it is an 8th note. On the second beat, the note has only 1 beam, which makes it an 8th note, so the following note will start on the AND count. The next note has 2 beams, making it a 16th note. And the last notation before the 3 beat is also a 16th note. Rather handy since that's all the space we have. Well, until you get to 32nd notes. On the third beat, we have an 8th note, followed by an 8th note, something we've seen before. Now, at the 4 count, this is what some people wanted to play at the first beat or vice versa. But look at the beams and what they do and do not touch. The 4th beat has 2 beams, so it's a 16th note. But the next note only has 1 beam touching it on both sides, so it is an 8th note. But it doesn't start on the beam or the AND count, so that can throw you off. And all we have room for is a 16th note, so good thing that is what the sheet music says the last one is. Now remember how I said that the beam typically goes to the right of the stem? Well, this is an example of why I said typically and not always. In this instance, the additional beam to indicate it is a 16th note cannot go to the right. The only place for it is to the left. And it, like the 16th note on the 4 beat, cannot connect to the previous note because that would make it also a 16th note.
So let's play this one to see if we got the hang of it.
One tip when trying to learn anything is to slow it down, but still keep a consistent tempo. Never vary the tempo while playing. You want to get used to playing at a constant pace, even if you're only struggling with one part. Okay, now you've seen up through 16th notes and some of the various ways they can be used and written. But most of what you have seen has been fairly easy just because of the spacing. You can tell the gap to the next note, so you can easily tell if it is an 8th or a 16th note. But what if the spacing was not so obvious? Which, by the way, is how you will usually see sheet music written. This is the same measure as we were just looking at, but without stretching the width to fill the page. Not as obvious, is it? This is why learning to read drum corps sheet music is so necessary. So let's have another quiz on everything we've learned so far. And just to make it a challenge and somewhat more realistic for some sheet music you may have already encountered, the sheet music will look like this and not stretched out. Besides, if you get used to it this way, a more difficult way, then when you see sheet music that is spaced out, it'll be a piece of cake. How do you play this one? Well, before I play it, let's take a quick look at what the sheet music is telling us. You see no rests, so you know right away that you will play on every beat. You see no dual beams that touch only one note, so you know that there are no 8th notes in between two 16th notes within a beat. You see every beat except the 4 of the first measure has a beam, so every beat except that one you will play on the and after the beat. If we saw an 8th note in between two 16th notes, then we couldn't say that. So at a quick glance, you know that you will play on all of the 8th note counts in both measures except the and after the first 4 count. Now all you have to do is make sure you add the 16th notes where they should be. Now that you've done that quick examination of the sheet music, go ahead and play this one. The counting adds just a little space, but not much. I only added the counts for each note played and not the counting in between the notes. By now you should know how each of the 16th notes is counted, so if something is missing, you know what it is and thus what to play. So now that you can see the counting, read along while I play it again. Okay, next one. Take a look, pause the video and see what you think it is, then rejoin it as I play. Now try it with the counting displayed. Now let's try something a little more fun. Here is a section of the drum corps song that I wrote. However, this particular section, or at least the first 3 measures, is a part of several songs I've heard over the years, although I didn't know that until after I wrote it. I even found a video online of another Pathfinder drum corps playing it, they just had a different 4th measure. Anyway, I wanted to include it because this is easy to play, but the music looks like it's a bit more complex than it actually is, so give it a shot. Now, tell the truth. It's easier to play than it looks, right? Wait, this is a video and I can't hear you. Never mind. So this has been a crash course on reading basic drum corps sheet music. As always, I strongly suggest you take actual drum lessons in person from an instructor. But if that is not an option at the moment, hopefully this lesson can get you started. This is only part 1 of reading drum corps sheet music, since we haven't even explored reading your section when the full drum corps is displayed, instead of just one instrument, not to mention accents, triplets, dotted notes, volume level changes, 30-second notes, flams, drags, and other elements.
As I said in the beginning, you may want to review this lesson many times to get more accustomed to reading music. I hope you find it good practice. I could do a whole video on just reading music and then listening to it to see if you got it right, but there are several more topics that we need to address, which means I need to get started on them. So, see you in Lesson 5.